Breakfast puppies?
This podcast contains adult language and content and is meant for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to the Glitterbois.
We're back with another episode focused on the rules. If you are new to the Palladium gaming system, or if you are a veteran and you have questions about how the rules work, we're here to help you out with those questions. And we like to make sure that everybody is at least understanding some of the basic concepts of the game. They can be difficult for new players to grasp. So today we're going to talk about the fucking central concept to Rifts and to Palladium in general, combat.
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways. This isn't THAC0 from old Second Ed. This isn't hit points. This isn't armor rating. This is all of the above and more. And we should talk about what HR, HP, SDC, and MDC are, I think, before we go compare and contrasting.
And these would definitely be the four important core acronyms of Palladium combat. And be you playing Fantasy or Heroes Unlimited or Nightbane or Rifts or Robotech or whatever, these four, well, you might only have three of them, but these acronyms are going to be important to everything that you do. So let's talk about the basics of combat. If you're familiar with something like Dungeons and Dragons or any other major traditional role-playing game, combat is simply a matter of rolling initiative and seeing who gets to punch each other first.
Right.
Yeah. You roll initiative, whoever gets the highest goes first, and then you sort of go down the list in that order and do some back and forth punching.
Let's make it very simple. What dice do they roll?
Well, you roll a d20 for initiative.
And add your
initiative modifier, which not every character is going to have one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in our home games, we do it a little bit differently. We do a D100 plus speed, but I don't recommend you doing that unless you know what you're getting into. Initiative modifiers typically come from special abilities. Like if you have like a class ability that gives you initiative modifier, those are rare and they're valuable. Appreciate them when they have. And the reason you should appreciate them is because unlike D&D and other games, in Palladium, you re-roll initiative every round. So having a good initiative bonus will frequently benefit you instead of just that first roll of the combat.
Mm-hmm.
But once it's your turn, you have a handful of attacks. You get to attack people with these attacks. The Palladium combat attack system is not something that I'm specifically wanting to talk about today. So we're planning an extended example of how that works later. Today, our main focus is going to be on just the very basics of how it is that you attack someone and how you defend. You see, in Palladium, unlike D&D, you have sort of an active defense system. You're going to attack someone, and they're going to have the option of actively defending against you. If they are a character that has the ability of automatic parry, which is core to, I think, every combat skill in the game. I can't think of a combat skill that you can take that doesn't give you automatic parry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's out there. Probably somewhere in a weird source book, this weird combat system that just doesn't, for whatever reason, let you parry. Anyway, if you have that, that means when someone attacks you with a melee weapon, you can attempt to deflect that melee weapon. So instead of them rolling their dice against a static number, you're rolling a number that can knock their number out of the park. And if they can't beat that, then congratulations, you take no fucking damage whatsoever.
Yeah, it's important to note that unlike D&D, you're not rolling against your armor class, your shield or the thickness of your skin. You're rolling against your ability to step out of the way or sideswipe or bring your sword up. And I like this because it makes combat more realistic. Two people don't just sit there trading blows. Ow, 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 until one falls down. That's not how sword fighting works.
And I know that Dungeons and Dragons and other games, they come out and say in text that no one reads that you're supposed to be using, armor class as sort of an abstract system to measure both dodging and getting hit. And it makes no sense. And anyway, grumble. But I love the active defense system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the parry. Parry is something that everyone gets to just do for free. Somebody attacks you with a melee attack, you can attempt to deflect it. You don't have to spend any currency of action to do so. The other option for active defense, because there's multiple options in Palladium, is the dodge. Now, if you listen to our Mechanoids episode, plural, the dodge was the first defense system that Palladium developed before they even came up with parry. Dodge is yet another way to completely avoid all damage. The main difference being that dodging takes one of your actions, unless you are one of the blessed few characters in the system that get what is called the auto dodge. And if you have the auto dodge, such as juicers, you don't have to spend an action to dodge. You can just do flips and shit and dodge all those bullets and lasers, and it ain't no thing.
So this brings us to AR? This brings us to AR.
AR, armor class.
So
armor rating.
You've failed your dodge. You decided not to parry. But good for you. You're wearing some padded armor.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's level 1. These things happen. You don't have a huge AR, but the weapon that's hitting you still has to penetrate what you're wearing. That's what your armor rating is.
It's like your fallback.
Yeah. It doesn't take much to hit in SDC combat.
We'll get to what SDC means in a second.
Yeah. Just think swords and punching.
Yeah, in Palladium's melee system, you don't have to roll against the base defense of 10, such as Dungeons and Dragons, which just assumes that everyone is constantly ducking and dodging or whatever. And this, you just got to get a 5 or higher to hit someone, and that includes your bonus. So, like, if you roll to hit someone and you have a +2 to hit them, you only need to roll a 3 or higher.
On a D20.
But armor rating increases that minimum.
Yeah, I'm not sure what padded has because I didn't bother. No one bothers looking up padded, but I'm going to guess it's somewhere around.
I think it's a 5 or a 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it's below 10. So that means in order to penetrate that armor, your combined total roll has to be that much or higher. And that's literally what it means.
Yeah. Yeah. If you, it's confusing because I was just looking at the mechanoids, which we were just talking about, and armor rating in that is the attacker has to be equal or higher. But if I understand correctly, in the rest of Palladium, the armor rating sets what you have to beat. So if somebody has armor that gives them an armor rating of 8, then you need to get a 9 or higher to hurt that person. Anything 8 or less, and it's taken out of the armor instead.
Yeah. Now, which brings us conveniently to what SDC is. SDC stands for Structural Damage Capacity, and it's how tough the things of you around you are. My table next to me has SDC. The shield I have upstairs in the garage has a decent SDC. The cars have an SDC. Motorcycles have an SDC. SDC can be hit with weapons we recognize in the real world. If you sit around with an automatic weapon and swap out barrels and have unlimited ammo, you will eventually drill through that tank. A tank has a very high SDC and a handgun has very low SDC, but it can be done. These are things that can hurt one another, and the SDC number of any given item or armor reflects the amount of damage it can take.
So think of it like literally what it says. It is the capacity of a structure to take damage. If you have armor in Palladium, that armor can protect you, the wearer, from taking damage to your corporeal form, but it still has a limit to the amount of damage it can take in your stead. If you have armor, for example, with an armor rating of 12, and let's give it 100 SDC, You will only personally take damage if your attacker rolls an attack with their modified strike bonus that gets a 13 or higher. In that case, that damage goes directly to you, the wearer of the armor. Now, well, we'll get to where that goes to in just a moment here. But if that roll is a 12 or lower, then instead, all of that damage that they roll on their whatever D5, D6 goes to the armor's SDC value. So those 100 points, instead of you taking the damage, we just knock it off your armor and call it good.
Which takes us to the next point. Inside that squishy suit of padded armor, you have what you so charmingly referred to as your corporeal form. That corporeal form, be it, that of a techno nerd like myself or of Arnold Schwarzenegger, has a certain amount of hit points. That's the amount of just, you know what hit points are. It's how tough you are. It's how big your muscles, if it's how much damage you can take before you fall into a coma and or death.
And literally, there's a mechanic called coma/death we're talking about here. Once you get to 0 hit points, that was when you start rolling to see if you go into a coma and go to coma land. Now, hit points is how much damage you can take to your body before you start, like bleeding out and whatnot. And if we're talking first edition fantasy exclusively, then that's it. Like, you have your armor and it has SDC, and you have hit points. Any damage you take comes right out of those hit points. If we're talking any other Palladium game, literally every other Palladium game but first edition fantasy, including second edition fantasy, every character also has SDC. So it's a strange use of the term. I get why they did it. It's meant to be more like Clint Eastwood taking a punch action points or whatever, calling it structural damage capacity, in my opinion. It's kind of weird when it applies to a person. But
they're already so acronym heavy in Palladium. That's probably why they're like, just fold it into SDC.
We don't need another acronym. But yeah, as a human, as a person, as a player of the game, you have extra points above and beyond your hit points, which are sort of like phantom hit points,
Well, it's not so much that. Like, take some examples from Rifts. Like the rogue scientist has significantly less SDC than, say, the mercenary soldier, or even the grunts, or a dog boy, for example. I mean, they're tougher beings. They've spent more time doing athletic things.
Yeah.
So
you can take a blow.
Your OCC or your RCC, or sometimes your race, will determine how much SDC you get as a player. You can also take skills to buff that up. We've talked a little bit about Kevin's love of boxing, but in this particular instance, it makes sense because a boxer, beyond anything else, knows how to take a hit.
That is 100% truth as a boxer. Yeah. Just knowing how to like, oh shit, I'm going to roll with it, which is the stat, which we'll talk about later. But yes, I agree. After SDC, depending upon what game you're playing, and there are actually not that many in the Palladium catalog that use
MDC.
Yes.
Mega damage capacity. Remember when I was talking about the tank? If you were shooting it with your Glock and extended clips, yeah, you'll eventually get through it. But MDC is the bazooka. MDC is the guided missile hitting that tank. MDC doesn't care what your AR is. It does not care what your hit points are. It does not care what your SDC is. Earlier versions of MDC did have conversions between SDC and MDC, and I believe I forget if it was 100 or 1,000 to 1.
It's always been 100 to 1. Yeah.
Okay. So 100 MDC in earlier games is 1 MDC. This is for when you get giant robots flinging fusion charges at each other. This is starship battles. This is the big fucking guns hitting the big fucking armor.
From my understanding, MDC was created to give game masters and players the ability to simulate space battles in a game that could also focus on small fire, like pistols and whatnot. So you could play a game like Robotech, where it started, that let you have one adventure that was just a handful of heroes in a fucking space dungeon, and then pull that adventure out into a group of folks in Veritex fighting in space, but not have to count thousands of points of damage with each action. So theoretically, the idea is that MDC is just, a magnitude of power over SDC. Theoretically. Yeah. Rifts kinda lost track of that in some of the books, but the theory is still sound if you, as a game master, look at the numbers and make sure that you've got them under control in your brain.
Yeah. And I mean, it didn't always work that way too. I mean, because the theory of SDC eventually making it through MDC. Take the same tank, and I believe this was the actual one they used in some earlier things, and throw a baseball at it. Now, if that baseball hits your skull, it's going to get you for SDC and hit points. I mean, a baseball to the skull fucking hurts. But if you throw that at the tank, you can do that all day until the baseball is powder, and you're not going to get through the wall of that tank.
But if you build the world's greatest baseball cannon that can fire in one shot over 100 baseballs at the same time, at the same target, that all hit that target physically, mathematically perfect at the same moment, then congratulations. You can do 1 point of MDC to that target. That target probably has about 400 to 700 MDC. So now you need to do that about 400 to 700 more times. That's a shitload of baseballs.
Yeah, and the turret is swinging your way, so best of luck with that.
Meanwhile, on the receiving end, you're an SDC target. That tank has turned its cannon to aim at your mega baseball launcher, which has, we'll say that, you built it out of scrap materials from the collective garages and basement of you and a dozen friends. Got it. Okay. It's got maybe 300 SDC. We'll give it that. That's generous. That cannon from that tank that you've just done 1 MDC with your 1,000 baseballs or whatever, or 100 plus baseballs, that cannon now fires at you. Now, let's say that cannon's damage is, we'll give it a very conservative cannon MDC damage of 1d6 times 10. Conservative.
It hit for 4.
4 MDC. Congratulations. That cannon has destroyed 3 of those. MDC go to destroying your baseball launcher because it had 300 SDC. Because every 1 MDC does 100 points of SDC damage, my friend. So congratulations. Not only is your baseball nuke destroyed, so is your house, your body, your girlfriend, your pet, and your back porch, your front lawn, the neighborhood, everything that you used to know and love is now nothing but a smoldering crater, instantly vaporized into nothing.
And I think that's where we leave it, right?
That's pretty much it. Those are the 4 acronyms of Palladium combat. There's a few others in special cases, but right now we're just talking about people using guns and punches against each other.
Yeah. A couple quick notes. When facing an MDC weapon, you've all seen the cartoon of the smoking boots in a crater. That's what happens to you if you are not MDC armored. So if this is your first time playing in the Palladium system, remember that. Look at your character sheet. Make sure you have armor on. It should also be noted that 100 SDC does not equal, because you can pump yourself over 100 SDC with the proper application of OCC and various skills and some good rolling. 100 SDC does not equal 1 mega damage on the defensive. The argument of the baseballs all hitting the tank at the same time does not apply to you.
Really? Okay, good to know. I couldn't remember if it was yes or no. I've seen versions of MDC where 100 points of SDC do it. So, yeah. I want to point our listeners to a movie on Netflix. It's not a very good movie. It's an okay movie. It's called Revolt. It stars one of my favorite minor character actors. His name is Lee Pace. If you've seen the Hobbit movies, he was Thranduil, King of the Elves. Lee Pace is amazing. Anyway, this movie is a sci-fi apocalyptic aliens invading the planet movie, which, in my opinion, whenever the aliens fire their weapon, you visibly see the difference between MDC and Blood and Flesh.
Yeah.
If you want to see it in action, check that movie out. You don't have to watch the whole damn thing. You can see it in the first 5 minutes of the movie and then move on. It's pretty cool, and it should clarify a lot of what we're talking about.
Hey, NPC, remember how we said this was going to be a short one?
It is. We're just a little over 20 minutes. Yeah.
Let's do a couple more short ones, eh?
Yeah.
All right, folks. Hopefully this helps you. That was AR, HP, SDC, MDC, and where to apply the damage.
Yep.
I hope this clears some things up for the newbies, and we hope you use it well. Don't stand in front of the tank.
And if you have any questions, please join us on our Discord or send us some messages directly, and we'll help you out.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Glitterbois, a Palladium Books fan podcast. Glitterbois, Rifts, the Megaverse, and all other such topics are the property of Kevin Siembieda and Palladium Books. Please buy all their stuff and help keep them in print and making more games. You can order directly at palladiumbooks.com, and their entire catalog is available digitally at Drive-Thru RPG as well. Our opening music is 8-Bit Bass and Lead by Furby Guy from freesound.org. This closing music is Caravana by Philip Gross, available at freemusicarchive.org. All sound effects used are self-made or acquired via Creative Commons Zero license. If you like what you have heard, find us on Twitter and Facebook as The Glitterbois. That's BOIS. And check us out online at breakfastpuppies.com/glitterboys. And also join us on the Breakfast Puppies Network Discord at breakfastpuppies.com/discord. And if you want to help us out, please spread the word and help us build a community. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time.